Our government has covered up child trafficking for many years. When you cover up a crime, you're aiding and abetting that crime. So our government has been aiding and abetting child trafficking. That's a very difficult pill to swallow for most people. It was really hard for me initially. And that's why we have an opportunity now, I believe, to clean out our government. It's not going to be easy. We would never trust anyone that is aiding and abetting child trafficking. So how can we even begin to trust our government that's aiding and abetting child trafficking?
I have a giant English Mastiff rescue who is trying to get through the barriers to the living room. So she's making a lot of noise.
She can kick down doors if she wants.
Yeah. Anyway, Nick, you are the man of the hour right now because of this atrocity that is, well, I wouldn't say being exposed for the first time because you've been talking about this for years. I had no intentions of talking about any of this, but all of the people in my world are like, you have to talk about this. You have to talk about this. And I'm like, okay, how do I talk about this? Because I feel like for the last, I don't know, maybe the last 3 years, maybe even longer than that, going back to the Bush administration, I have been just completely disillusioned by mankind based on how it trickles down from the top. You know, just watching these demons in action. But I guess in the last 4 years, it really, really hit me because once you see all the lies, you can't unsee it. And then all of a sudden, we have the alternative media, and all of that has become not untrustworthy, but we just don't know what to believe anymore. I guess the things that interest me the most are the cloning ideas, the pandemic collusion with Gates, with Epstein. Like, these are the things that I'm really freaking curious about. And you're the expert, so I'm going to shut the fuck up.
Well, let me give you a little background of how I got into all this.
Okay.
I was digging around for a story, and I came across a really horrific document about a cult that was trafficking children. And it was a U.S. Customs report, and they got busted in Tallahassee, Florida. There were two of them. They got busted with 6 kids. And the kids were ragamuffins. A concerned citizen called, and the cops took one look at the kids and put them into protective custody and arrested the 2 guys. And then there was a search warrant that was executed on, the cult was called the Finders. There was a search warrant that was executed on their warehouse in Washington, D.C. And the D.C. police had a lot of tips about them and were really interested in them. And U.S. Customs got involved because they've got a child pornography or child abuse section division. And they executed a search warrant on this warehouse, and they just found horrific stuff. The cult there was child pornography, and the cult was buying 2 kids. There was a telex that talked about the cult buying 2 kids in Hong Kong. And I was really stunned by that. And then I was reading this U.S. Customs report, and I was getting more and more infuriated. And then on the last page, it said, there'll be no more investigation on this. It has become a CIA internal matter. And I just went, whoa, that does not compute with me. That does not enter a paradigm that I'm in. I must have, and I studied in college, and I worked at a university and went to graduate school. I kind of thought I had a beat on a lot of stuff, but that document just blew me away. And first and foremost, the CIA, it's against the law for them to act domestically. And then, second of all, what are they doing going to bat for this weird cult that's seemingly doing nefarious things to children? So I started looking for other phenomena, and I ultimately ended up writing about a trafficking network. I started in 2002, 2003, and I spent 7 years on it. And the book was called The Franklin Scandal, A Story of Power Brokers, Child Abuse, and Betrayal. And Epstein is almost a carbon copy of the Franklin Scandal. Yeah. You've got, there were two primary pimps in the Franklin Scandal, and there were two primary pimps in the Epstein Scandal. In the Franklin Scandal, there was Lawrence King, and there was Craig Spence. And Craig Spence was a CIA asset, and his house in D.C. and a mansion in D.C. that was wired for audiovisual blackmail, much like all of Epstein's homes were. And King kind of did the logistics of providing the children, as Maxwell did. She built a machine to make sure that Epstein and all his cronies had enough kids. And so that book was published in about 2010, The Franklin Scandal, and nobody bought it. No, I mean, and I remember pitching it to editors in New York and publishers, and they would have this cognitive dissonance, because at that point, by the time I was pitching it, I had a bunch of sealed grand jury documentation. I had a list of like 60 kids, and it was, I had enough to really convince someone. And I can remember the editors, they were looking at me, and I could see the little mechanisms going on in their brain, and they were thinking to themselves, this is a horrible story. I need to help Nick Bryant, or I can write Nick Bryant off as crazy now and be done with it. And I knew most of them were going to react that way, but I didn't think all of them would react that way. So that book came out with very little fanfare. I was a little devastated, but I'd heard about Epstein. And because I know this realm pretty well after writing the Franklin Scandal and going into that darkness for 7 years, a couple of years later, I went down to Florida because there were stories coming out about Epstein that he'd molested some girls, and he was a lone pedophile at that point. And a grand jury had declared that he hadn't molested a single victim. And actually, with the Franklin Scandal, 2 grand juries declared that not a single victim had been molested. So I went down to Florida in October of 2011, and I ended up getting his black book. And I called the victims first. I wanted to make sure that, and one victim, I didn't talk to her directly, but I talked to her mom, and her mom she was talking to her, and her mom told me that she was 13 when Jeffrey Epstein started molesting her. And then I talked to another victim, and she talked about being flown around, and then I talked to another one who talked about being flown to an island. So I think I was the first person in journalism to really understand the breadth of Epstein's network. So I went back to New York with the black book, and I thought for sure this is going to be critical mass, and somebody's going to take a chance with this. And again, no one wanted to take a chance with it. And ultimately, Gawker published it in 2015, and in the interim, I'd gotten the flight logs too. So I've been at this for 12 years. 12 years.
Crazy. So why? All right. So now it comes out. It starts to seep out. Now Trump's in office. Everyone is saying, he's going to release these Epstein files. That was part of, that was part of the election campaign, was all these things would be exposed, from 9/11 to, all these he would declassify all this stuff. Why did he start calling it a hoax? Do you have any? I mean, I know that's not where you've been investigating. I know that, but I'm just asking what your opinion is on why.
That's a great question, and a number of people have asked me that question. So this cover-up started under George Bush II, the cognitively challenged George Bush, and he built the Pandora's box that was the cover-up of this. And Obama didn't touch the Pandora's box. Biden didn't touch the Pandora's box. Trump didn't touch the Pandora's box in his first administration. But he did say when he was campaigning that Epstein transparency would be one of the things that he would do. So I think Trump thought that he could crack open Pandora's box ever so slightly and then shut it. And then he'd be able to get away with whatever he needed to get away with. But the thing about Pandora's box is once you open it, regardless of how little you open it, you release the curse. And the curse does not go back in. It's like the toothpaste that comes out of the tube. So Trump released the curse. And then he did a lot of soft shoe. Bondi said that she was going to release the Epstein files, and she assured America that we were going to get transparency. And then you had the conservative influencers coming out of the White House with their white three-wing binders as if those were the files. Oh. So what they released was a joke. I knew it was a joke as soon as I saw it, because when I was with Gawker and we released the Black Book, we redacted the names of the adults, and then we redacted the last names of the victims and then also their numbers. So we redacted the numbers of the adults and the last names and numbers of the victims. And when I saw what Bondi released, they redacted everything. And then on the flight logs, they redacted everything. I released more incriminating information on Jeffrey Epstein in 2015 than they did in 2025. So they were faced with a dilemma now. They really underestimated the moral integrity of America and also their knowledge of the Jeffrey Epstein case. So they gave us another round of documents, which were, again, a nothing sandwich. And then on July 5th, they came out, the FBI and Department of Justice came out with a very strange document that no one signed. It said that there were 300 gigabytes of child pornography or child abuse material taken out of, impounded from Epstein, and that there were over 1,000 victims. And I agree with both those things. But then it said that Epstein and Maxwell acted alone, which is complete nonsense, actually very absurd. And that Epstein downloaded his child abuse material from the internet. And Bondi had previously said that there were videos of Jeffrey Epstein molesting children. So they were lying and also being very disingenuous. And that's when they tried to build the firewall. And that's when Trump was asked, are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? Are you still? And then you had a couple of very courageous representatives, Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna. And they started a discharge petition. And that's a mechanism in the House where if you can get a majority of the House to vote on something, on a discharge petition, you can bring that vote to the floor of the House. And they did get their 218 votes. And then at that point, the Trump administration just caved in, and there were 533 representatives, 534 representatives that voted for the Epstein Transparency Act. One didn't. I had to look into him. But all senators, all 100 senators voted for the Epstein Transparency Act, and then Trump signed it into law. And at that point, there was a lot of pressure on them to release some documents. And they did release documents, and some of them are very horrific, for sure. It's stuff that I've come across before when I was investigating the Franklin child trafficking network. And there was stuff that I already knew about Epstein because I'd been investigating him so long that it made perfect sense. Like, I knew that Jeffrey Epstein was trafficking girls under the age of 12. I knew that. And I knew that there were very sadistic pedophiles. That Jeffrey Epstein pandered some of these girls to very sadistic pedophiles. The exact same thing happened in the Franklin Network. The pimps in the Franklin Network were Republicans, and they pandered little boys that got molested. And Epstein was primarily pandering to Democrats, little girls that were molested. But and the pimps in the Franklin scandal, they liked pubescent boys on the younger side. But if you wanted a 7-year-old, they would get you a 7-year-old. And the same thing is true with Epstein. If you wanted a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, he would get you a 7-year-old. Now, people that traffic children, people that traffic other people, and especially people that traffic children, are vicious, psychopathic people. They have no conscience whatsoever. Jeffrey Epstein had no conscience. Ghislaine Maxwell had no conscience. And they don't have, like a lot of us have, an impediment of our conscience to prevent us from doing things that we shouldn't do. But people like that, they do not have a conscience.
Yeah, that probably would be an episode unto itself to try to unravel how you turn into that. How they, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much of his history is out there because, like I said, if anything, my kids were sort of debriefing me on all of this around the time of the Charlie Kirk event, and I guess all of this, it started to go deep into what everybody's talking about now, from Mossad to MI6 to CIA and all of these sort of, Robert Maxwell and all of that stuff. And I have my teenagers telling me the chronology of this man's life. We grew up in New York, so I'm here, this Dalton school. I'm like, wait a second, what? I went to Marymount and Loyola down the street. I'm like, are you kidding me? But okay, I have a question about, I do want to know, I would like to know how these people are grown to do this, because I don't think it was just, I'm a pedophile and I'm getting arrested because I'm a pedophile. I think there's so much more to it. And I almost wonder if, was it a complete setup, knowing that house, which I lived a few blocks down from that house in Manhattan. It was one of the mansions I would walk by when I was a kid, and I was like, this one's beautiful. This is a beautiful home. Like, I can't even believe that there were these fucking demons living inside of there. But I feel like as a child, when I would see the milk cartons, I mean, nobody was talking about it. I mean, this has been going on forever. I mean, when that film came out, The Sound of Freedom, I think they were talking about the trafficking business being, was it $30 billion a year? Is it 30 billion or 30? I can't remember.
It's more lucrative than that.
I mean, that's absolutely astounding that every government is involved in that. And that changes the story of Epstein, where this is just, a man with a few of his, world leaders that he can use this sexual proclivity to go and blackmail everybody. This is way more massive than what we're being handed here. And I think that's why I felt like the noise of it, which is now feeding into society, because I listen to my kids and the other kids that are posting stuff and reading stuff. And I'm like, this is a collective negative, everyone's feeding off of this negativity. And I can't help but feel like these people are enjoying this, because in some way I feel like they wouldn't have allowed it to seep out unless they were, it's got to be a controlled sort of offering to the masses. And but at the same time, with this whole digital age, I feel like they can hide a lot and they can sequester a lot, but at the same time, a lot of stuff's going to seep out. So there's going to be sort of there's going to be an exchange of information. We're not going to know what's real anymore unless we have you out there knowing, because you've seen everything. You know what's fake. I mean, now there's a lot of like these kids, like I told you, my kids and their friends, they're saying that some of these that some of the emails have been they were able to get the redaction off, that they were able to get through the black marks. And I'm like, is that true? But a lot of the, I worry more about the youth consuming this information right now. And some of them are completely like freaked the fuck out. And then you have other kids like mine who are not desensitized, but they're used to hearing it. They're just used to hearing about. Then they're not allowed out of my sight. My kids, they also want to kill me, but I'm like, nope, you got it. That's it. You will never be allowed to go anywhere until you're 40.
With what's happening now, I think there was tremendous pressure on the Trump administration to release documents, and they did not live up to the letter of the law, because the letter of the law prescribed that they release all the documents and that only victims be redacted. They did not live up to the letter of the law. I think they released maybe half the documents, and there's way too many redactions. And some of them are just nonsense. And people, I mean, they're horrific, but a lot of them are just nonsense. And people have gone very, very far downstream in a lot of nonsense. And I've tried to bring journalistic integrity to the emails that I'm looking at. And some of them are truly horrific, though. I mean, truly horrific, evil. Some of them are truly evil. And I think that a lot of people have gone down too many rabbit holes with these, but that's to be expected. When I first came across the Franklin scandal, I went down a lot of rabbit holes trying to figure it all out, and people are just trying to figure it out now, and that's really it's difficult because our government has covered up child trafficking for many years, and when you cover up a crime, you're aiding and abetting that crime. So our government has been aiding and abetting child trafficking. And that's a very difficult pill to swallow for most people. It was really hard for me initially. And that's why we have an opportunity now, I believe, to clean out our government. It's not going to be easy, but we would never trust anyone that is aiding and abetting child trafficking. So how can we even begin to trust our government that's aiding and abetting child trafficking? And we have an amazing opportunity right now to actually, and I know why the government is covering up child trafficking, because there's blackmail involved. And there's a lot of powerful people that are blackmailed. And until we get to the bottom of that, our government is going to be a sewer, and your children are going to have to grow up in that sewer, and their children are going to have to grow up in that sewer. So it's really important that I think we've got a window here that won't happen in our lifetimes. It might not ever happen again because our leaders are determined to take us off a cliff. That's what I believe. I mean, the wealth polarization, the middle class is just getting completely shrunk. And that's because of legislation that gets passed. I mean, a lot of legislation does not favor the American people. It favors the masters of our congressmen and congresswomen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, it's no surprise that people know me for the mafia, for being in a TV show, for being a rat who gets taken out back and shot for supposedly leaking information about organized crime, which is pretty funny.
very sad. I was quite a Sopranos fan, and when they murdered you, when Silvio murdered you, I was very sad.
Me too. And I never gave up any information. I never actually gave them anything that would have warranted my murder. But now, basically watching tons of innocent lives just sort of squandered away. And then, you have all of these supervillains that get to walk. And I do believe that this entire thing is just one giant mafia. And I do think that I probably shouldn't even be talking about this, on the show, but I don't really give a shit at this point. If they want to take me out back and shoot me, they're probably going to do it. Keep yourself safe too, since you've been the number one talking person on this topic. But the Italians, in my mind, are always behind everything at this point. The more research I do, because I haven't been researching detailed issues that are in the news, but I've been researching other things. And it just, okay, so just keeping it on Earth here without even having to go to Italy, keeping it in America, just keeping this in America, the mafia and Epstein and people like Meyer Lansky, and how there's always going to be an Epstein. I mean, you dealt with that even in the Franklin scandal.
Well, I think there's always going to be multiple Epsteins. The Epstein that we're looking into now wasn't the only Epstein. And there are various trafficking networks as we speak that are being protected. I mean, and I've been in this field for 22, 23 years, and I've spoken at a lot of anti-trafficking, anti-exploitation conferences. And I'm kind of a lightning rod for that type of stuff. And people approach me all the time and tell me about being trafficked here and being trafficked there. And I think some of them are very psychologically damaged, but it's difficult to know. Why are they psychologically damaged? Are they psychologically damaged because they went through what they went through, which would definitely be psychologically damaging? Or are they psychologically damaged because of other reasons? But I've gotten to know a number of the Epstein victims, and that was not to work through that is very, very difficult. And the Franklin victims too. A lot of them, and both Epstein and the Franklin scandal, they got kids from lower socioeconomic backgrounds and generally dysfunctional families. So it was easy to seduce them with money and or drugs. And then at a certain point, they lose their youthful marketability and they're just expunged. And at that point, you've got a very damaged young adult who comes from a dysfunctional background, who's been molested repeatedly, and who's probably addicted to drugs and or alcohol. And they go on to compromise their own credibility. That's Alan Dershowitz, when he was representing Jeffrey Epstein, got dirt on all these kids because of their MySpace pages. And these kids are damaged. I mean, and that's what makes this system almost perfect, is because these kids that are abused repeatedly, they compromise their own credibility. And when a kid says, I was molested by that senator, and they've got a record of maybe mental illness or chemical dependency, no one's going to believe them. And like George Mitchell, he was the Senate Majority Leader. And Epstein was pandering underage girls to him. And he looked like this benign grandfather. But he was actually a child molester. But no one's going to take the word of a very damaged kid or young adult over George Mitchell, the Senate Majority Leader.
How does someone become Epstein? Like, if we become people that can easily be influenced because we're damaged, then how does someone become him or Robert Maxwell and Ghislaine? How does that happen?
With Epstein, his dad was a gardener for New York City. And he grew up in a very blue collar neighborhood in Coney Island. And he was a very gifted piano player, and he was a very gifted student. And I can't prove this, but this is, I think, a probable connection, is Donald Barr was in the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA. And then he actually ran Dalton's, he was the headmaster of a Dalton school. But before that, he ran a special program at Columbia where they'd take very talented kids and the kids would spend like Saturday afternoon with them. And I have a friend in New York who was a very smart, talented guy and was put in one of those groups. And then he realized at a certain point, whoa, this is CIA. And he's a tough New Yorker raised here. But when he was talking to me about that, I mean, he was crying that he came very close. But anyway, so I think Epstein was put into one of these special groups because he was a very talented kid. And then Donald Barr went on to become the headmaster of Dalton, which is maybe the preeminent preparatory school in maybe the country. It's certainly in the top 5. So Donald Barr hired Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Jeffrey Epstein didn't even have a college degree. And Donald Barr was a by-the-letter fascist. I mean, he was a very hardcore right-wing type guy. There's no way that he would have hired Jeffrey Epstein unless he knew Jeffrey Epstein. There's no way he would have hired someone without a college degree unless he knew them. So I believe that that's how Jeffrey Epstein got started. And then he didn't last very long at Dalton, a couple of years. But Ace Greenberg he ran Bear Stearns, and his daughter went to Dalton, and he, I guess, liked Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know exactly what the relationship was there, but he gave Jeffrey Epstein a job at Bear Stearns. And at that point, Bear Stearns was dealing with a very dirty bank called BCCI. And it's where drug lords, arms traffickers, the CIA, they all laundered their money at BCCI. It's probably the dirtiest bank of all time. Now, Bear Stearns was dealing with BCCI. So that might have been where Jeffrey Epstein also got into intelligence. But he got fired for insider trading, but nothing happened to him. And then he was hired by a guy named Douglas Leese, who is he's British, but he's definitely intelligence. He's an arms trafficker. And Epstein was trafficking arms for him in the early 80s. And at that point, he was in business with a guy named Stan Pottinger, who was trafficking arms illegally to Iran. And they rented a penthouse at the same rent. So you've got these two CIA assets working together. And Doug Leese was taking arms. He was trafficking arms from China to Iran. And Pottinger was trafficking arms from the United States to Iran. And he was definitely really, really dirty by then. And Stan Pottinger would go on to be this eminent lawyer, and he would represent a bunch of Epstein victims and completely sell them down the river. I can explain that. Stan Pottinger, nasty piece of work. And before he got into business with Jeffrey Epstein, he had been an assistant attorney general, and he covered up all kinds of stuff. Like the FBI had a spy program called COINTELPRO. He covered that up. The CIA had a spy program called Chaos. He covered that up. He covered up a lot of things. And then he ended up as an attorney for a number of the Epstein victims. And what those attorneys did was the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund program was created. And anyone who got a settlement from the Epstein Victims Compensation Program had to sign a release, and they couldn't sue anybody else.
Yeah, I saw that. That's dirty shit.
Really dirty, really dirty.
Yeah.
And I've got in an article I wrote, Stan Pottinger, there was a woman named Sarah Ransom who had a horrible life. And I mean, she'd been molested repeatedly by her stepfather, and then she fell into the clutches of Jeffrey Epstein and Maxwell. And they really treated her horribly. I mean, they treated all the girls horribly, but they really treated her horribly. And she tried to commit suicide when Stan Pottinger and David Boyce were representing her. And she was in hospital recovering from and on pain medication and psychiatric medication. And Stan Pottinger is writing her emails, I've got them, about how she needs to settle. So he's pressuring her to settle when she's in that kind of a condition. So these poor girls, they fell prey to Jeffrey Epstein, and then they fell prey to these attorneys.
Amazing. Just like a big fucking Truman Show for them, well, for all of us, really. I mean, it just all these actors, it just feels like, just a bunch of actors at this point. Oh, okay.
And those poor girls, I mean, I became friends with Virginia Giuffre, and her book, Nobody's Girl, has really been a runaway bestseller. And she was really an amazing woman. She was a supernova. But I think that the trauma just caught up with her. And her husband was beating her up quite frequently. And I think that ultimately was the critical mass of trauma as to why she took her life.
I can't, I didn't think that was, I thought that she was possibly killed. I didn't think that it was at first. And listening to her speak too, like there's no, I know you've said possibly that did she have dissociate, did she have, I mean, I'm sure all of these girls have I can't even say it, yeah. Jesus. Say it, go ahead, you say it.
Dissociative identity disorder.
That's it. But when you listen to her speak, she's not, she just sounds, it's heartbreaking to listen to her speak. She's so genuine and so beautiful and so just like she knows, she really understood her own damage, instead of just sort of throwing things out there. But when I saw that video that had come out where she was beaten, and then everybody was commenting on it about how could she still have the necklace on in the hospital, and there was all that. I remember this from a while ago. I don't remember when exactly this was, but I remember thinking to myself, "Oh man, this kid's not going to be here much longer."
That was her husband.
That is unbelievable. Like unbelievable that there couldn't be one person who could just take mercy on a situation and just, I don't know. I don't know what
is. She was let down by every man in her life, and she was also let down by the system. But somehow she summoned the courage to go up against Ghislaine Maxwell and Prince Andrew. I mean, she summoned the courage. And but I think that she had been repeatedly molested by her father when she was 6, and then her father farmed her out to a friend of his when she was 8, and then she was put in this really weird institution when she was 12. So that she started running away from, and she started selling herself on the streets at a very young age.
Do you think Ghislaine was also tampered with growing up in order for her to become this fucking animal?
It would not surprise me if Robert Maxwell molested his daughter, Ghislaine. I don't have proof of it, but Robert Maxwell is another guy. He's a psychopath too, and he's a predator. And I would not be surprised if Ghislaine came from that type of damage.
Yeah. What about these new emails? Is it today? The ones about Epstein talking about uh, the Maxwell, that the Mossad took out Maxwell. So I feel like there's a really big push right now in society to create this Mossad, CIA, anti-Semite. Like there's a really, I mean, it's off topic and it's not off topic, but I can't help it's just it is the theme of society right now. And we're breaking all these people into religious groups and more hatred and more. And you talk about who was, I forgot who you said was a real fascist. The Dalton guy, the bar. Yeah. Um, I guess that's where my focus has been lately, having so many Jewish friends, so many Israeli friends, and just trying to put the pieces together between all of these sort of organizations and trying to convince people that have become so anti-Israel that this is way beyond that it's not, that we're not, this is not about, and now we have Epstein, who's Jewish, and now it's a perfect storm of, pointing a finger at a certain religious group. But it's like, I don't think these are not religious people. These are people that are bowing down to something very fucking different, and they hide behind these religious constructs of they hide behind religion, and religion has just become another version of organized crime at this point. Spirituality is different, God is different, but so
There's an undercurrent of anti-Semitism in our country, and I think people confuse. They don't differentiate between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. They're very, very different. And I think that people kind of lump them together. But I also think that there's been an undercurrent of anti-Semitism in the U.S. for a very long time. But Epstein was Jewish. Many of the people that he pandered children to were not Jewish. People at the federal law enforcement level and in the judiciary that covered up his crimes, they were not Jewish. So it's just not a Jewish thing. It was Gentiles that were covering up Jeffrey Epstein.
But the blackmail aspect of it, which is everyone's favorite topic these days in the alt media, is it was the Mossad, it's Mossad, it's Mossad. And it's like, I feel like we're also not looking at our own CIA, and MI6. For me, it goes back to the royals, and then it goes back to the bankers and the technocrats. And now they're probably at war with each other to a large degree. And then I wonder how that plays into, well, I don't wonder, but how it all plays into these files and how it was completely built to be able to have enough blackmail on people. I mean, even this, like the Puff Daddy thing, when that came out, I was like, what will be the play here with this? Like, what is the ultimate play? Like, I understand, and I can't help but feel like every little ounce that the government gives us, because journalism's compromised now, that. I mean, you're on your own path. The stuff on the news, like, this is like one of our main shirts here for our company, Ultrafree. I mean, this is a fucking war machine that we're dealing with. This is not, trying to inform the people. This is trying to control the people by different narratives. And I'm sure that now, whether they had to let some of this stuff go or not, there's a controlled way in which they're going to do it, which we're witnessing. And I am curious about, like, even what you think about how, like, what do you think the next steps are going to be? The Prince Andrew arrest, who's going to get arrested? Has anyone been held accountable for anything that's happened in the last 4 years, let alone the last 70 years? So,
but you were talking about the Mossad, and people ask me that often: was Epstein compromising people for the Mossad? And I generally have the same answer, and that is, Epstein might have been working with the Mossad for sure. I mean, he was doing arms deals with Ehud Barak, who was the prime minister of Israel. And a lot of the people that were involved in those arms deals were ostensibly former Israeli intelligence. But there's no way the CIA is going to let Jeffrey Epstein compromise American politicians on American soil without getting a cut of that intelligence. It's not going to happen. CIA and the Mossad are like the Genovese crime family and the Gambino crime family. They work together, and they've just found it much better to work together than to fight each other. And I think what a major indicator that it's CIA is when Jeffrey Epstein got busted, there was a bullshit grand jury that said that he hadn't molested a single kid. I've got the transcripts. It was a very corrupt grand jury. And the Palm Beach police chief, Michael Ryder, who's really the hero in this, he is the unsung hero in this because he took a lot of heat. He wouldn't back down. He went to the Department of Justice and they impaneled the grand jury, and they drafted a 60-count indictment against Jeffrey Epstein. And one of those counts was child trafficking, which is 15 years to life. So what happened was Alexander Acosta, he's taken all the heat because he gave Jeffrey Epstein a sweetheart deal, which gave everybody immunity. And Jeffrey Epstein had to spend 13 months in a county jail. But here's the thing about that. Alexander Acosta, as a U.S. attorney, isn't going to go out on a limb and cover up unilaterally a nationwide international child trafficking network. He's just not going to do it. And plus, actually, he put together a 60-count indictment against Epstein. The only two people in the government that can tell a U.S. attorney to stand down are the president and the attorney general. And at that point, the attorney general is Alberto Gonzales. And Alberto Gonzales isn't going to cover up a nationwide international child trafficking network unilaterally unless he's told by his boss. So that order came from Bush, the cognitively challenged George Bush. And I think that that's a really good indication that Epstein was working with American intelligence, is that the president of our country was willing to cover up his child trafficking network.
So do you think that this we're seeing women being trafficked to other world leaders, to, important billionaires, whatnot. But what about the business of it? What about this $33 billion? I say 33 like it's the number that all of these, I guess maniacs use. But then again, it was also supposedly the year that Christ died. Now I'm getting off topic. But the $1 billion child trafficking ring, is it even addressed in these files? Is it actually addressed that hundreds of thousands of kids are being trafficked? What about the kids that supposedly were missing during this administration, that supposedly Homan had found 100,000 of these kids? What about the kids that they're finding in these containers when there was the strike, when there was the transportation strike, and all these kids were banging on inside these cargo containers? I mean, is this how children are being trafficked? And I mean, even just the film Sound of Freedom, watching how that network works. Are we even seeing any of that type of stuff within these emails?
Well, I mean, the emails are talking about, there's pictures of girls as young as 10 or 11 in the emails. And now there is accounts of very sadistic treatment of the kids. And I know that that there were some major sadists that Jeffrey Epstein was pandering children to. But a lot of that information, and I've stubbed my toe on some of it, because you got to be very careful about some of those documents, because the sources are very, very suspect and tenuous. But in America, and this is from the Centers for Disease Control, 25% of underage girls are molested and 5% of underage boys. And most people in the field will say it's slightly conservative for underage girls and very conservative for underage boys. But if you just go with the CDC numbers, you've got over 15 million Americans who have been molested as minors. And that is a huge number. That's very substantial. And there's a segment of them that have been trafficked. And it's really, that's a very dark world. And there are, and it's hard to believe, but there are parents that traffic their children. I mean, it happens all the time.
When you hear of the hundreds of thousands a year, that's when I start asking questions that go beyond the scope of just, this planet and this earth. I know it sounds crazy, but it's hard to think that, okay, are they trafficking for how many thousands of pedophiles around the world that need to have these children? What happens to the children after they've been trafficked? Everybody's talking about, sacrifice, cannibalism, all of these topics now that are just, again, horrific. I hear it from my own kids. So I'm like, because I'm focused on these other topics and the kids are coming to me telling me about this thing, And I don't watch the news, so I don't know what's happening on the mainstream news. But it's hard to wrap my head around hundreds of thousands of kids being trafficked without understanding where the fuck they're going. And how it is $1 billion business. And that all we have are these files, which people think are enormous. But I'm thinking to myself, if there's this many kids trafficked, this is a tenth of what we're being told about.
There's been difference over the years about how many kids are trafficked. Some say 15 to 25,000. There was one out of the University of Pennsylvania that I think it said 225 to 325,000 kids are at risk for trafficking. But those are very difficult numbers to know. And what I find kind of appalling is the FBI can tell you exactly how many cars were stolen in America last year, but they can't really tell you how many kids went missing. That's where and our society really doesn't take care of children the way that it should. What we're talking about now is a symptom of our society just not. I mean, families with children are the fastest growing segment of the homeless population. And that's hugely problematic. And there are kids that suffer from hunger at least once a month. So there are a lot of issues that are problematic. And I find it amazing that we've got all these billionaires that probably pay less taxes than you and me, but yet we cannot house all our children. We cannot make sure that our children have health care. We cannot make sure that our children get proper schooling, proper child care, because these things are expensive, but these are things that our government is off bombing third world countries, and we could be using that money to take care of our children. But unfortunately, our society doesn't really put a premium on the welfare of children. And children cannot produce commodities and they cannot vote. And I think that is a major problem.
Well, I don't think this government cares about its adults or its children at this point. I mean, they care about us so that we can keep the wheel spinning. But I mean, you have philanthropists that are hiding under this charitable guise of trying to save the world. But their version, I always bring it back to my kids. We watched this cartoon Naruto for years, me and my son, and I can't help but feel like this anime cartoon has completely dictated what we're living through on this planet. Like these people writing this cartoon know exactly what's going on, because the bad guy is convinced. You almost understand the mentality of the bad guy. It's why I was asking about where you think Epstein or Maxwell or all of these people, how they become who they become. Why did they? Because you almost have this, not sympathy for the bad guy, but you start to understand their thinking, not when it comes to abusing children. That's a completely different thing. But when they want to disseminate the entire planet, when they want to end the world, or at least reset it, because they're always talking about a reset. There's a reset. And I think that's been going on every 300-year cycle. There's been some kind of a reset in different societies. I mean, this is our society that we're living through now. Yeah, they almost, people like Bill Gates, like, okay, that's what I was definitely the most interested in when I saw the files. I don't know what was most surprising to you, but I wasn't surprised by Bill Gates being involved in this ring. But when I saw the pandemic stuff, because my life changed over the pandemic. Like it changed. I would never be having a fucking podcast talking about freedom. I would have been very happy to act once every 4 years and support my family and live an anonymous life. That's basically who I was in the last 20 years. But then once this pandemic happened and I didn't do the vaccine thing, I started to see things and I was like, I can't unsee this anymore. Everything is not what I thought it was. And I had an inkling, but I never knew. I became you. We all became you. All of us started to investigate. Not all of us, a percentage of us all became our own journalists to a degree, because we knew that journalism was dead, except for the few warriors like yourself. So now I'm just trying to make sense of stuff, and I'm just trying to help other people not be shocked when they hear the vile truths that I've been hip to for the last 5 years. But a lot of my friends are hearing about this stuff for the first time, and some of them need some hand holding when they're hearing about it for the first time. So yes, there are a few topics that were surprising to me, but yet not surprising. I would first want to know what was the most surprising to you, and then I'm going to tell you what I was surprised about and want to know more about.
I wasn't really surprised by much of this. I've come across a lot of this material before. The one thing that kicked me in the gut was an email from Mark Tramo. He was a UCLA neuroscientist, and he's got an MD and a PhD. And he wrote this email to Jeffrey Epstein, and it says, was just reading today that newborns will suck on a pacifier more vigorously if it triggers playback of recording of his or her mother's voice than another woman's voice. So that one really, really stunned me, that they were talking about an infant. And actually, Mark Tramo, he has paid a price. He's no longer on the UCLA website, and they're not renewing his contract. And he should resign, not only from UCLA, but from the human race. I mean, that one shocked me. There were some other ones that shocked me, but that one.
Well, really, to ask Epstein, I mean, what the fuck is he? How is he an authority on such a topic? You know,
I mean, if this was going to someone else, then it would, but it's going to Jeffrey Epstein. So it really, and it 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 really shook me up, that one.
What about all the mentions of, I know you continuously talk about this stuff. I don't want to be too repetitive, but all of the code words, the shrimp, the muffins, the pizza, the grape soda. And I don't know if you were a Pizzagate person, a Wayfair, all of these things that were mentioned in the past. Are there any ties to any of that stuff in the emails?
Well, I concluded that muffins were muffins and steaks were steaks, but shrimp are shrimp. And there's a lot of emails about pizza that are very, very strange. And I looked into Pizzagate and I couldn't find a there. So I kind of moved on. But yes, there's definitely code words. And I think that pizza might be a code word, and people might excoriate me because they think that I'm embracing Pizzagate, but there are a number of emails about pizza that do not make any sense to me whatsoever.
Why are people with the Pizzagate stuff? Is it because is it still just considered a conspiracy theory? I don't really know. So I'm asking, like, honestly, is it a Q thing?
A lot. Yeah. I mean, but it's kind of interesting. Bill Maher, who ripped Q quite a bit, came out and said,
we should apologize. Right. Well, what's crazy is my producer just brought me a bunch of Q people, and I go, why do you want me to, I don't really know that much about it. She's like, I think that because she knows how my mind works. She's like, I think you might be interested in some of this stuff. I was like, okay, I'll visit it. They wanted me to talk to one today. I was like, I don't know enough, so I'm not going to do that right now. But I'm sure they tie everything together in a package, and I'm curious. I'm open to listening to everything because I really feel like I know nothing, and every time I learn something new, I'm like, wow, now I really know nothing.
Here's an email that is from Barry Josephson, the esteemed producer, Hollywood producer. And
I don't even know who these people are, if you can believe it. See how much Hollywood I know about. I just saw the Mira Nair stuff today, and the publicist, the Petty Segal woman.
So Barry Josephson, who hopefully will be out of a job now, he said, Jeffrey, how old is she now? Best, Barry. And Epstein replies, 16. And Barry says that he's going to call her mother, which is very ominous. But then they have another exchange where Barry Josephson says, also, I've been thinking about the question that you asked Bill Gates. How do we get rid of poor people as a whole? And I have an comment regarding that for you. When can I call you today to discuss? So Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein and this malignant producer are talking about how to get rid of the poor people. That is, and Bill Gates comes from a eugenics background too. His father was into eugenics, and it's obvious that he's grown fond of eugenics too.
How is he walking around on the earth? I have never said anything. Like, I don't say anything bad about anybody ever. And I'll still pray for this man that he has a moment of, I don't know. I really try to just sort of pray for everybody at this point, but I don't understand it. I think that might have even been some emails in there about Pakistan or polio or something. And then I think about what I thought had happened in India with him, where he was no longer allowed in the country over what he had done to the female population, to a portion of the female population. through some of his vaccines. And then all of a sudden he's allowed to launch this vaccine here in America, do what he did to the American people, not just the American people, the entire world. I know we pulled out of the WHO treaty, but I think that there are other, and it's funny, I look at these moves by our government that are, would be considered contentious towards a man like him, Bill Gates, pull out of the WHO treaty, but yet he's got him there. Are we keeping our enemies close? Are we playing a game of 5D chess? Marjorie Taylor Greene would say absolutely not. It's also confusing to me, but what I don't understand, and then all of a sudden Bill Gates is allowed back in India, and I see all these videos of him, and I'm like, who did he fucking pay? What is happening? Why is this man allowed? And that's why I am confused about Epstein. If Epstein had that much control and that much power, sure, he wasn't the face of a lot of these things the way Gates has been for years. But how he was not protected in the end, that he was the fall guy, that he was the one that went down when he's got the vast network of the blackmail in place. I almost wondered if when Trump called it a hoax, that if that's what he's referring to, I can't figure out if Trump's a good guy or a bad guy anymore. I don't know what's real. So I'm just going to continuously be asking questions. I know that all of my Democrat friends and their kids think Trump's the boogeyman because he molested all these girls and he's a rapist. And then I have, the conservative friend, everybody's split into these different groups. I have absolutely no opinion about anything because I think the story is still developing and it's going to continue to develop and new information is going to emerge. But at the same time, I'll never think that Bill Gates is a fucking good guy, ever.
I've never looked at Bill Gates as a good guy.
But some people think, the Democrats think this is, he has been saving humanity one vaccine at a time. How? I mean, that's a separate topic, but.
Bill Gates, I actually think that Jeffrey Epstein had Bill Gates blackmailed, for sure. And there's an email where Epstein doesn't come right out and say it, but he essentially says Gates tells Epstein that his wife is concerned that he's spending too much time with him. And Epstein comes back at him with some veiled threats of blackmail, which I thought was interesting. And then he asks Epstein for antibiotics. You would think that a billionaire would be able to get. He asks Epstein for antibiotics that he can surreptitiously slip his wife because he's gotten an STD from, I believe, a Russian prostitute. So
I'm sorry.
He's
asking Epstein for fucking antibiotics.
Yeah,
Mr. Virus, let me give your computer a virus and I'll sell you the cure for it. Let me give the fucking world a virus and I'll sell them the cure for it. He needs antibiotics from this motherfucker. Oh my God. I'm sorry. The Italian in me. I didn't see that one.
Yeah, that's pretty telling. I think the thing is, you talked about the right and the left, and the right, ever since I started writing about this kind of stuff, I haven't been able to vote for Republicans and Democrats. I just haven't been able to do it. But
I'll never vote again. I'll never do it again.
The right thinks the left is mentally ill, and the left thinks the right is mentally ill. So they've been divided and conquered. When you've got that trend, you've got three trends, I think, that are really damaging our country. You've got the divided and conquered. And actually, I think that this is probably the only issue that can bring the right and left together, is that children shouldn't be blessed with impunity. But you've got the right and the left divide, and then Americans have been conditioned to think that they can't affect change. And then a lot of our politicians are blackmailed. When you superimpose those three trends, you end up with the kind of society that we have right now, a very unstable, tenuous society where the middle class has essentially been America was very, very strong because of its middle class, and the middle class has been heavily eroded now. And,
Yeah.
and that's been a trend for the last 4 years, which is very tragic.
I did think that a topic like this could bring America together. Sure, I think a lot of topics should have brought America together, but somehow every fucking topic that is a humanitarian issue has become politicized. And that's why we started the podcast. We were like, fuck the left, fuck the right. We need to be ultra free, and ride this down the middle and forget about all of the politics. But like I said to you, when I think it was Rolling Stone that wrote that article about that film, and I am like, I couldn't understand how sex trafficking, how children were politicized. It was they used that because Trump was running for office, and Kennedy and all of them, and anything that was happening that might have been a topical issue for conservatives, it was, so then all of a sudden where Trump's in office, and now people care about the Epstein files. They didn't care about it while Biden was in office because it was a nonstop race towards trying to figure out how to sexualize children too. I mean, that was happening during that whole administration with, and I always had a theory about this whole trans thing. For me, had nothing to do with the Biden administration caring about a marginalized community. I think it had because I knew that it would be abandoned once he was out of office. So they were basically using these kids like as pawns, and using the gay community, that they were never going to ultimately take care of anybody. But I think they were trying to get this word into people's vocabularies and into people's psyche, which was transhumanism. I don't think it was about trans. I think, and I think that even in these files, I think I've heard you even talk about it. This whole sort of idea of creating these designer babies.
Yes.
So that would be a trans sort of human. It's trans. But now we're also talking about transhumanism with all of this nanotechnology, which I'm sure that there's references to it. There's got to be between Gates and Epstein, or Epstein at least being hip to the fact that they're working on all of this sort of technology to control the masses, between the technocrats, the bankers, and Neuralink, and all of this sort of stuff.
And then 90% of the media is owned by 6 corporations. That doesn't really help out very much either.
No.
And
that's the beginning of the problem.
And it's tough for people to know. I mean, if we didn't have the internet, we would not have access to truth whatsoever. That's what I believe.
That might be the best at this point.
But it's really difficult. Truth requires a little work a lot of the time. It's not, truth isn't easy. I mean, I've been going through these Epstein files, and some of them are definitely disturbing and I believe true, and then others are not, because of the sources. So it's very important. I studied philosophy in college, and it's very important for me to come at everything kind of agnostically and then decide whether or not I believe in it or not. Once I reach a critical mass of evidence. But I think for our society, this is going to be it. I believe we're never going to have a better chance in our lives, as I said earlier, to actually fix our society than we're going to have now. And it might be ever, because our leaders are not very benevolent to Americans. I mean, they're just not. But we can fix that now. I really do believe that we can fix it. And
how?
I started a nonprofit organization called Epstein Justice. And what we want is an independent congressional commission. We think that that's the best way to go. An independent congressional commission doesn't require the signature of the president. It requires a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate. But a lot of times, independent congressional commissions, and we'd have to insist upon this, employ non-government personnel. And that is the only way that we're going to get to the truth of this. And these documents really show that we need someone to get to the bottom of it. And we need an independent congressional commission. And what Epstein Justice is lobbying for is two objectives with the independent congressional commission. We want to know why the government covered up child trafficking, and we want the perpetrators to be punished. We want to see the perpetrators in prison. So it's very simple. It's going to be difficult, but I believe it can be done. I might be delusional. I've never been diagnosed as delusional, but I believe it can be done.
I believe it can be done too. If we all really stand up to all of this insanity. Okay, I still have a couple of questions that I'm curious about. You did say that you've gone through so much of the emails and evidence, but some of it you don't think is true. What does that mean when you say that? That some of the emails are bullshit, or that they're just fluff and they're not as relevant or as important and they're just giving it to us to shut us up? Or that they're actually not true?
I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So witnessing murder by perpetrators, there is a document from the Southern District of New York, and it's talking about someone witnessing Maxwell and Prince Andrew torture a girl to death. Now, the name is on this particular document is Brian Miller. And I've looked all over for Brian Miller and I can't find him. And now that doesn't mean he doesn't exist, but I'm pretty sure I know where he lives. So it's very strange that I haven't been able to find him. And then there's another one that's talking about two girls being buried at Zorro Ranch. It's from Eddie Aragon. Now, Eddie Aragon is a radio personality. And what this is about is it's somebody saying this to Eddie Aragon, writing an email to Eddie Aragon saying that he will provide Eddie Aragon with all this evidence if Eddie Aragon gives him a Bitcoin. So we don't really have a solid source for that. And these two particular emails have had a lot of fanfare, but I haven't been able to find Brian Miller, and the guy who wrote this particular email was trying to get money from a radio personality. So I don't know. And I called up Eddie Aragon, but I haven't gotten back to him. And then there's an FBI report about Epstein being Mossad, and actually the source on it says confidential human source, but I know someone who wrote an article about that particular confidential human source. His name is Charles Johnson. And here's a headline about Charles Johnson in The Independent. Notorious far-right troll ordered to pay up to $71 million in racketeering scheme where he pretended to be a spy. So I think it's really problematic to take this guy's word that Epstein was Mossad. I mean, I believe that Epstein worked with the Mossad, but I think that this is a really, really poor example of veracity. So that's where people have to be careful, is they have to look at the sources and then dig into the sources.
So when the government releases stuff like that, is it they're just releasing all stuff and they
Yes.
are aware of the fact that these might be bullshit, but that's a good nugget to disperse to the public. So fuck it, let it go.
That's exactly what they did. Yes.
To keep people snooping around and being their own sleuths and completely forgetting about their lives for a minute.
Well, I see people going down rabbit holes, and I'm all about a solution for this. And we don't even need these documents to start getting indictments. We know who Epstein's procurers are, and we know who Epstein's recruiters were. And we could, if our Department of Justice had the will, we could impanel a grand jury next week and indict all of them on multiple counts of child trafficking, which is 15 to life. And you could give them 5 or 10 counts, and then they would roll over on the perps. And if we could protect the witnesses who have been molested by these perps could come forward and testify. That would be very, very simple. And we don't even need any more documentation. And actually, in one of the documents, Sarah Kellen wanted to make a deal. She is a really nasty piece of work, and she was Ghislaine Maxwell's primary lieutenant and led hundreds of lambs to the slaughter. And she wanted to make a deal with the Department of Justice, and that deal didn't happen. So that was a huge opportunity for our government to start getting justice. And I'm pretty sure that if there was a fire put under her feet, she'd make a deal in a heartbeat too. So we can, it's really up to Americans whether or not we want this fixed. And it's up to we the people. It can't be like, well, this guy over here is going to do it and I'm not going to do it, or this guy over here marched and I'm not going to march. It's up to all of us. And Epstein Justice, I think, is the best vehicle for us to actually get to the bottom of this. We put a lot of thought into what we wanted out of Epstein Justice, and we came to the conclusion that an independent congressional commission that employed non-government personnel was the way to go. And I think that would be really the only way to go if we want truth. But it's gonna take a lot of us. It's gonna take all of us.
And when you say, is it signatures? What is it? What does it look like for people that are out there that are listening to this? What do we do?
You can go to EpsteinJustice.com. You can register. We put on monthly webinars. There's a change.org petition that we have that's got over 80,000 signatures. You can join one of our we have Facebook groups for every state. And what we're doing is, as these Facebook grow, we're having the people that take their to phone and make contact with their respective federal legislators so we can start putting heat on them. And we are endorsed by Thomas Massey and Ro Khanna too. So that's a huge thing. And we're going to be getting more endorsements from politicians too. And we're growing. This started out as just a very grassroots movement, and it still is a grassroots movement. But I've been dealing with this issue for a long time, and I really want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. That I want to make sure that our government never covers up child trafficking again.
Yeah. Is the baby farm a real thing?
What's
what?
That?
What did you say?
I said it's going to be easy.
Yeah, it's going to be easy. Oh my God. I mean, I think that what you're trying to do would cover even more than just the magnitude of child trafficking. I think that it is symbolic in many ways of just complete fucking evil that has been perpetuated against us for so long.
We'd be able to clean our government up because there are a lot of people in our government that are compromised. And actually there's a sitting U.S. congressman, his name's Tim Burchett. He's from Tennessee. And he came out a couple of years ago and said, my colleagues are being compromised in honey traps.
Yeah, I like that guy.
Yeah, I like him too. So we know what the problem is, and we have to get that compromat out of our political system. And I believe that we can have a much better society. If we don't, our politicians are just going to take us off a cliff. I mean, that's what I believe. So I think it's mandatory that we we work together, right, left, Christian, Jewish, rich, poor. We have, all of us Americans have to work together on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's even beyond America. I mean, I feel like this horror has been happening since the dawn of time. From, occult stuff, religions, all kinds of insane stuff. And if we don't stop the repetition of it, finally, it's just going to keep perpetuating over and over again. And it's growing bigger and bigger. The beast of the government is getting bigger and bigger. So yeah, symbolically, it just also feels like, something that needs to be stopped once and for all. Just that level of power and corruption and just complete, just savage, it's just some savage, primitive
evil.
Yes, it's evil. And I don't know where you've gotten with any of these files in terms of being able to trace anything that leads to the occult. I know I'm probably keeping you too long now, but I do have to ask that because I am so curious about these Mengele ways of, what possibly was happening at Zorro Ranch with the cloning and all of this stuff.
Well, I believe with the Franklin Network, there was occult stuff. And I've looked very hard for occult stuff with Epstein. I haven't been able to find it. I mean, he's bought books that are occult oriented, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's in the occult.
So have I.
So but I definitely knew that there was girls under 10 and there was extreme sadism. And these documents show that. And there's 3 million documents that need to be released at this point. And we need those documents released. I think that they will tell the rest of the story. But for me, I'm very happy I've been working towards this for a very long time, for people in America to acknowledge this reality. And it's finally being acknowledged. But anytime you have a disease or a pathology, you go through 3 phases. You go through awareness, acceptance, and action. And I think that these emails are giving us acceptance, and then the next step is action.
Yeah. Well, do you think that we're going to see the rest?
I hope so, but we don't really need the rest. We just need a grand jury to start get impaneled and start indicting the procurers and also the recruiters. And then
who do you think are going to be the first? Who would you like to see go first?
Well, I'd like to see the procurers and recruiters, because I think that they would be the most susceptible to rolling over. And Sarah Kellen wanted to make a deal, and
why didn't they accept her deal? Because they're not ready for it.
They were covering it up, so that was why they didn't accept her deal, is because they were in the midst of covering everything up.
Of all the biggest names out there, who do you think is the most guilty?
I think it goes pretty much up to I think it goes to Mount Olympus. I think that there's a lot of people. And
I missed that. It goes to what?
Mount Olympus. It goes all the way up.
Oh.
And the thing about it is I got to a blackmail photographer when I was writing the Franklin scandal. Kind of an unctuous guy, smart guy, but unctuous. And I was trying to get my mind around everything. And I said to him, how does this work? And he said, once you're compromised, it's like you're on a yacht. And it's a beautiful yacht, and it's a beautiful day, and you can have anything you want on the yacht. But if you decide to get off the yacht, the people on the yacht are going to make sure that you drown. So at this point, we need to sink the yacht. And we can do that. We need to sink the yacht.
Okay. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you
We
so
need to
much.
sink the yacht. Even though I want to ask you 5,000 more questions, I won't, but I'm sure there's going to be new developments and we could talk about this again if you will come
Absolutely.
back and talk to me. But one quick thing. Was there any mention of Podesta and all that whole world of
No.
no?
There's the pizza mentions,
Right. Of course.
but not Podesta.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me.
Really nice to meet you. I was a huge fan of The Sopranos. That was
Thank
probably
you.
my favorite television show of all time.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's nice to know. That's good. I get you probably like, how the fuck did she end up over here asking questions about this stuff? Well, you know what? I'm the rat. I'm still the rat. Adriana is the rat. I came out of the grave for justice. I'm with you. I would like to see everybody held accountable.
And I
for
can give
everything.
you and your producer can put up my links to like Epstein
Yes,
Justice.
we will.
Yeah.
We will, because I feel like a lot of, I'm hoping that a lot of people that unfollowed me because I voted for Trump will still be watching to figure out why I'm still doing what. So I want a different audience. I would like to capture a different audience than the audience of all of the conservatives and stuff. And a lot of, like I said, a lot of the younger kids are freaking out. And I think that they're being fed so much information on social media that it's just noise. There's a lot of fucking noise. So it would be nice for people to know that you are the gold standard to parse through all of this material so that people aren't being misled and focusing on a lot of chatter and being super focused on the stuff that's actually important. So yes, we will definitely want people to know where to find you. What's the name of your website?
EpsteinJustice.com. And I've got a personal website and I've written books, but actually EpsteinJustice.com is more important than anything else.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, Nick. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
If you can, after all this.
I'm used to it.
And pedophile priests look away, thoughts and prayers for peace. What you don't know will hurt you every time. What you don't know could be the key to the crime. Well-intentioned, that's the road to hell. The greater good always rings the bell. What you don't see will be the end of you. What you call conspiracy might just be the truth. Wake up, break down the wall, bring on the fall of evil men. It's you or them, they're gonna do it again. Politicians and heads of state cast your vote against who you hate. What you think is real is a head trip game. What you hope is change will only stay the same. Wake up, break down the wall, bring on the ball of evil men. It's you or them, they're gonna do it again. Smiling talk show hosts don't listen, they lie the most. What they want to sell you is a poison pill. False prophets, well-paid shills. Wake up, break down the wall, bring on the ball of evil men. It's us or them, they're gonna do it again.